Ever since the new edition of Horus Heresy came out, I've been desperate to play. I'm never going to do that, but I've finally found a way to bring it to Kill Team. So I've really loved these Mark 6 Space Marines ever since they came out. They remind me of
Marxist Space Marines?
I would love a Marxist Space Marine. They really remind me of the Space Marines I grew up reading about in books. You know, like I love the Horus Heresy. I'm a big lore nerd, and I've wanted to get my hands on these for a while. But the thought of getting another full-scale game is just like, I'm like, come on, you can't do it all, right? But a couple months ago, Games Workshop released this melee upgrade kit for the Mark 6 Space Marines, and I thought, this is perfect. Finally, I have all the tools I need to get these on the table in Kill Team. So today I'm going to go through my process of how I bashed together some used Marines with this new kit and all the steps I took to get all of the options ready for my Angels of Death team.
Nice.
So to get going with this project, all I really needed was this new Horus Heresy melee weapons upgrade kit, and then a handful of used Mark 6 Marines that I picked up from my local game store. So the very first thing I had to do was kind of take a bit of an inventory. Like, these were not built very well by their previous owner. Obviously, these are kind of most closely similar to an Intercessor, so I had to see like what I was working with before I even broke out the upgrade kit. Some of the stuff was broken in the bag when I received it, and one of them has some like big heavy stubber or something that's basically just glued onto the front of him, and he doesn't really have arms. These are pretty rough, and they're going to take a lot of cleanup and a lot of kit bashing to get ready. You might be wondering like why I started with these used Space Marines instead of just getting a kit. I don't really have a good answer other than like all of my favorite projects are both cheap and fast, and this seemed like the cheapest, fastest way to do it. So one thing I have to contend with here is that the Primaris scale is so much bigger than these Heresy Marines. Interestingly, like if you look at them kind of side by side, it's not that much bigger. It's just like kind of a head taller, but the proportions are obviously different. They kind of make it look leaner and taller. So I don't really have to do too much. If I can just do the classic, cork on the base trick to add some height to these, I should be okay. So this is kind of my test model. Now that it's dry, take a look at them side by side, and it's certainly close enough that I don't think anyone can accuse me of modeling for advantage here. Like, it might be a millimeter or so shorter, but I think it's fine. So this captain didn't come in the bag of Marines. This was actually given to me by my friend Scott. He's a longtime supporter of the channel and a very, very killer Warhammer artist. I'm going to link his Instagram down in the description. You should definitely check it out. I think he's always got his commissions open and does super cool Warhammer art. I've got a few pieces hanging in my hobby space, including one permanently tattooed on my arm. So yeah, for this captain, all I had to do was really add a power fist and kind of leave it as is, because the plasma pistol and the pose and everything is already great. I think it's clearly a captain. So once I slap him on a big enough base, I think he's going to be ready to go. So the next one I wanted to get finished was the Intercessor Gunner, because this is kind of going to be one of the more complicated ones, so I wanted to make sure I had all the pieces in place that I needed for it. I'm actually using the Primaris gun for this. I mean, I don't really have use for this one Dark Angel Intercessor now that this is the new kill team, so I'm going to sacrifice his hands and gun for the cause and basically port them straight over. This one ended up being very simple and I think pretty effective. The gun is so much bigger than the normal bolters that it really stands out and is very clearly the Intercessor Gunner. Next order of business is the Intercessor Sergeant. There wasn't a great option for a power weapon in the correct hand to work with any of the bolters, or like an offhanded bolter, so I ended up going with this sheathed chainsword. I think there's enough plausible deniability that I could rock up to a table and claim that that is any melee weapon I want it to be, but of course it's usually going to be a power weapon. Then I've got the Assault Intercessor Grenadier. I went with one of the arms from the upgrade kit holding a grenade, and obviously a chainsword. This isn't rocket science, you know? But it's funny going through this, like, I mean, I'm not the most anal member of Mountainside Tabletop when it comes to building models and scraping mold lines, as I'm sure you can see from our videos, but like, boy, the person who put these together really left some bad ones. And if these were like pieces right off the sprue, it would have been so easy to fix them. But it's so hard to get a knife into some of these spots to scrape a mold line. But you know, what are you gonna do? When you're buying used minis, you kind of take what you can get. So the last specialist I had to worry about was the Eliminator Sniper. You know, I wasn't going to be able to like properly get a sniper rifle here, so I just took the one that was using the most kind of like staring down the barrel posture, seemed snipery. Then I cut off the front and added a piece of what I think is maybe a Scion's las rifle or something from my bits box. Just found something that extended the gun just to make it look like obviously longer than the rest of them. Threw a scope on top. I mean, like, this is obviously not a proper gun from the Warhammer universe, but it is just clearly like a longer and more scoped version of the same thing. So then all that was left to do in the building stage was to throw some texture on the bases and then move on to paint. So after all that scraping and everything, what I've ended up with is a captain with a power fist and plasma pistol, Intercessor Sergeant with a bolt gun and a sword, Assault Intercessor Sergeant with a chainsword and a plasma pistol, an Eliminator Marksman, a couple of Intercessors, one of which has the auxiliary grenade launcher on his bolt rifle, and then a handful of Assault Intercessors. I mean, I'm certainly not going to use all of these in every game, but I'm really happy with all the options here. I've got a ton of different list building flexibility, and I think I can deal with most lists with this.
All right, so like the hard part is over now. Now I'm just doing like a very quick and dirty Raven Guard paint job.
Spray it black and you're done.
Yeah, I know. It's like the funny thing is once I prime it black, it's like, well, everything else is optional now. I think that this box is a great resource, not only for people that are trying to do this project, but like such good bits. I mean, where else can you get just like, you know, 30 chainswords and like all of the different pistols and stuff? Like, it's definitely a resource that I think is worth it.
Sounds like we're like assembling a doomsday bunker. Where else can you get 30 chainswords to fight the zombie apocalypse, dude?
All right, so now I'm just going to go through my extremely fast Raven Guard scheme. Did this in a weekend. There's no reason for this to take very long. So yeah, on with the show.
So that brings us to painting, and this is going to be a very, very quick scheme. I decided to make these a Raven Guard kill team. I'll explain why later, but obviously, no big surprise here. The first step is to spray the whole thing with black primer. I used Army Painter here. Honestly, like I've kind of used them all, and I don't really have a favorite. They're all fine. The next step, which always just feels so stupid, is to do like a quick kind of heavy dry brush, overbrush thing of black paint. I'm using an AK black here that I really like. This obviously feels ridiculous, but it's just in case I screw something up later and I have to go back and fix it. It's not going to be like a different shade of black. It just makes it a more consistent coat. I also prefer painting over like the kind of more matte finish that the AK stuff gives me, so changes the texture a little bit as well. Then I'm going to do an all-over dry brush of the armor using a mix of that same black with a little bit of dark sea gray mixed in. It's a very, very, very dark gray that's a little bit on the kind of cooler blue side. You can't really see it here, but it's kind of the first layer of highlight, and eventually they start to build up and you'll see more. Then I'm going to break out a smaller brush and just pick out some of the metallic stuff like the chainsword teeth, kind of panel here and there. Obviously the endless backpack vents on any Space Marine project. Bolt gun magazine, all the classic stuff that when you're batch painting you always miss one and have to go back. Discovered a new least favorite thing to paint in this project, which is these molecular bonding studs. I think they're so cool and they're such an iconic Horus Heresy thing, but my god, totally tedious. Then I decided I was going to give the sergeants and captain a white helmet, just make them stand out a bit more. So the first step here is to throw down a thin coat of pale gray by AK. All the paints and products and stuff I use are going to be in the description below. Really happy to say that Vallejo workers aren't on strike anymore, so the full list of paints is going to be down there. Next, I got bored of that and just threw down a thin coat of red to start building up the layers on his cape. Obviously, like, painting anything over a black undercoat is going to take a bunch of coats. So I decided to just, start now, get it down, kind of worry about building it up more as I go, but basically just killing time as other layers are drying. Part of my speed painting method is, like, always be doing something. So if something's drying, there's always somewhere else that you could be throwing some paint on. So I decided to do, his cape and the little broom on top of his head in red. Funny thing with Raven Guard is, like, this is basically done. Like, if I wanted to, I could slap a wash on this and, like, throw it on the tabletop. So now I'm just going to go around with a layer of Nuln Oil from an old magical bottle I still have of the original recipe. I haven't found anything else that washes over whites and light grays as well as old Nuln. You can just control it so well. Next, I'm going to throw a layer of this Vallejo tan on the base. I'm going to go very, very heavily over this with pigment powders and dry brushing and stuff later, so I'm not too bothered that you can see a lot of the black through. Just wanted to get a bit of color down before I started. Then as that's drying, I'm going back over all the white areas with another layer of pale gray, staying out of the recesses, of course, but just building it back up towards white. Then I mixed in a little bit of white into that pale gray just to brighten it up a bit and do another pass of highlights. And then my absolute least favorite part of any project that involves them is putting on the transfers. I'm so bad at this. I see videos of lots of other hobby people doing this with microsol and microset, and they make it look so easy and it looks so good. And all my friends have armies with transfers that look so clean, and I don't know, I'm just like too much of a left-handed moron or something, but I just can never figure these out. So we talk about this all the time on the channel, but just as you watch me struggle with these transfers for an eternity, I just want to take a minute to thank all the folks over on our Patreon for their continued support. It really is what's keeping this thing going and what's keeping our motivation so high to keep improving what we do and keep expanding what we do. We wouldn't be able to take on these projects without kind of doing some more complicated math on whether or not it's worth it and that sort of thing. So thank you so much for letting us be creative and expand what we do. And we're going to keep doing it. So thank you. So after wrestling with them for what felt like 2 weeks, finally got them on, got rid of all the bubbles for the most part, and then threw on a coat of gloss varnish to lock it in. Now I'm ready to kind of start on some weathering. It looks like they're hardly painted at all, but I think this is going to be a lot of the scheme is just wearing them down and making them look grimy. So the first thing I'm going to do is throw on some very, very watered down Typhus Corrosion, like to the point where it's breaking apart, but it just creates some good texture and some brown kind of rusty colors in there as well. And then I'm just going to throw a layer of white on everything that's going to be glowing later. I wanted a bit more contrast, so I decided to go through and pick out some stuff with gold, especially on the captain, make him stand out a bit more. The captain and the sergeants, but a few accents here and there. It just felt kind of more, I don't know, extravagant or something, but extravagant's the wrong word. I don't know what the right word is, but gold. And then I love this part, do some edge highlighting and just some other like kind of random chips and scratches and stuff with silver paint. I really enjoy doing this and kind of thinking about where areas on the armor are that would get the most wear. So like, knee pads and that sort of thing. Like knee pads are something that is likely to get chipped in battle 40,000 years from now. I'm doing these on kind of like a Martian desert type base, but like going very, very dusty, and sand and dust blowing around is hell on paint, right? And so I'm doing a lot of kind of wind blown scratches and that sort of thing by basically dry brushing with silver. It's all like kind of strategically targeted areas, but then randomly applied in those areas. Now I'm going to start building up the cape a little bit more. I started out by glazing on some highlights, but it was taking forever and wasn't opaque enough. So I thought, who's got time for this? Certainly not me. So then I dry brush the whole thing. I'm going to do some proper highlights later, but just to build up some saturation and kind of inform my highlights, I just did a quick dry brush and then came back with the same red color to do some kind of textural highlights to make it look a bit more scratchy and worn in universe. This is such a fun part of the process. I don't know if there's any mini painter out there that doesn't see a big red cape and think like, oh yeah, that'll be the fun part. That's the dessert you save for the end. Then I'm going to throw some thinned down kind of fluorescent glowing pink paint from Army Painter. I really like this paint. It's called Power Node Glow. Looks great under UV light, obviously, because it's like proper fluorescent. It's super thin in the bottle, so it airbrushes really nicely. So this has kind of become my go-to glow method. So after undercoating the area with white, I throw in a thin layer of this pink glow paint, and then I airbrush over the same area with the same paint. So obviously it's like a more transparent application, looking like it's glowing out of the sides. After the pink, I'm doing the plasma glow, which is Vallejo Game Color Fluorescent Yellow. Now while that's drying, I'm going to start building up some of these pigment layers. This is a really, really great rusty pigment from Vallejo. I've started using this a lot. I mean, you've probably noticed it if you're a frequent viewer of the channel. Like, a lot of my stuff is on this sort of Martian base scheme. I think it just looks so good, and one of the main reasons I wanted to do this team as Raven Guard was because of how well this sort of Martian base was going to contrast with the black. That was kind of the main aesthetic driver of it. So while I'm putting this on, I'm going to talk a little bit about why I chose to do Raven Guard here. In terms of the lore, it kind of made sense to me. So at the beginning of the Horus Heresy series, the Raven Guard obviously is like almost wiped out. And so I think there's kind of like a interesting thematic aspect to like small groups of them fighting together. I mean, the Horus Heresy game is like built on such massive army type conflicts, and that's why like there's the Titans and the Legions Imperialis and that sort of thing. And so I think as far as like Space Marines and the Heresy, this kind of made sense as a small stealthy group working in like kind of a special ops capacity. So after a pretty heavy application here, I'm going to throw down a matte varnish. I'm going to do more later. It's pretty amazing how much this stuff will disappear with the varnish. So then the next step with the glowing eyes and plasma is just to throw in some very, very thin white paint. It looks pretty opaque now, but it's going to calm down a bit as it dries, but I find that this is a great way to kind of sell the glow, make it look really bright. Then, as I'm waiting for that, I'm going to do a quick dry brush on the base with some of that tan color mixed with Army Painter Boney Spikes. And then a final application of the pigment, really, really caking it on here. I just love how this looks with the black. I love how it looks with the white and the green and the pink. I think it's just such a nice color contrast, so I lay it on pretty thick here. Definitely wear like a, COVID mask or something while you're doing this. Even just like a bandana tied around your face, because, this stuff gets in the air and it'll like coat your teeth and lungs and stuff. It's pretty nasty. I don't know if it's toxic, but it's extremely unpleasant. After a final coat of matte varnish and then a quick black base rim, these are ready to go.
Bro, you painted those too fast.
Yeah, I know.
I need to give you a speeding ticket. What is this?
Yeah, they really came together. I'm really happy with how this team turned out. People talk a lot about painting black being difficult, and I understand why, but I don't think it has to be. I think like it's probably difficult to hit a golden demon standard with it, but with a lot of dry brushing tricks and that sort of thing, I think you can get a pretty effective black, and the matte varnish really helps sell it.
It really does.
I feel like we talk a lot about it and use it on everything, but I find like it especially is effective on black.
Is that our most goated hobby project?
That and streaking grime.
Yeah.
Like I put that shit on everything. Actually, not on this paint job, so never mind. So yeah, that's my Angels of Death. We're gonna have them in a battle report coming up, and I'm going to be using them throughout the edition. I'm really happy with how this project turned out. There isn't really like a set Angels of Death kill team box or anything, so what I love about this team is that like everyone's is a little bit different, and this is mine. So
as a dwarf enjoyer, I like these sculpts because they're just a little short.
They're short, and
they have funny proportions.
The proportions are so funny. Like after being so used to Primaris Space Marines, it's like they're not that much smaller, but they look smaller.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really dig them. I think they're great sculpts. See you in the next one. We've got a battle report coming out very soon with this team. So soon. soon.